Ladies and gentlemen, can I ask you to please take your seats again? We are going to start now with general discussions on the quality enhancement system we are having here. I'm going to ask Jean-Marie Homberg, member of the Quality Board, to guide us through the session, please.
Okay, so before going to the general discussion, I'm very pleased to discuss the mentions made by Norman at the beginning of the meeting on the kind of trust that we have between the Quality Board and your institution. I think we said that from the beginning. Maybe at the beginning you really didn't believe us, but the more we talked about you, we had the feeling that now there is really a trust between your institutions and the Quality Board. And it really shows both in terms of discussion that we have, in terms of the way the reflective analysis is carried, and I think that's very good for the quality enhancement format. Of course, it's always very difficult to have the same scales for all the institutions because the institutions are very different. But we need to find some sort of scales. And obviously the scores that we can get on different scales are not going to be used in the same way in the different institutions, but we need to have some sort of scale. It was mentioned before by Rita that we're probably going to have, for instance, a one-page summary of what's happening in your institution, and I think that's a good way of progressing. Basically, our main goal is really to enhance the quality, and in order to be able to do that, we really have to have some sort of clear question, clear reinforcement analysis of the different part of institutions. I guess the basic thing that we want to do now in the discussion is to have both Rita, Frank, and the Quality Board and the rectors of these two universities being able to answer questions that have not been answered in the presentation. So I guess just feel free to ask questions, and we'll divide up who is going to respond to the different questions. So please go ahead. Yes?
My name is Lola Leosi from the Ministry of Education. I'd like to see if the faculty board can give us some sort of information about the comparability and the compatibility of the framework that's being used for these institutions compared to those being used internationally elsewhere where they've been, and whether, in broad terms, confidence in an institution under their framework as employed here would mean that that department in another university elsewhere internationally would also be deemed to be of the same, of the same standard.
Wait, do you want to answer? Norman?
Well, can I say something? The first part of your question was the similarity between the process here and the process elsewhere,
yes,
and then the nature of the judgments benchmark against international standards.
Yes.
Two challenging questions. The answer to the first question is, and of course I'm very, very biased, that this is a better process than you'll get in most other countries. And I don't say that lightly. I've spent a long time working throughout Europe through the Bologna processes and with ENQA internationally through the international network of quality bodies. And you can divide a lot of the business into those countries that have basically inspection programs, where you would see quality assurance of higher education as part of a regulation framework. the way you regulate food production, the way you regulate, I shouldn't say banks, but you know, it's part of the regulatory framework. So you have sets of rules, and you inspect against these rules, and you either meet them or you don't meet them. Now, the evidence that we have tells us that that is actually not a very good way to progress for a whole variety of reasons. But the most important reason is it is actually very ineffectual to do that. And it's tragic. I spent some time with the agency in Ethiopia, and indeed we had some members of staff from the Ethiopian agency with us for a while in Glasgow. And in a context where resources were just so scarce, the resources they were putting into that, I thought, were being totally wasted. They'd taken standards that were totally inappropriate, that did not fit the country, and they were just setting up elaborate games that soaked up resources. Even looking closer to home, around some Scandinavian countries, for example, and I really don't want to badmouth anyone's systems, and there are lots of reasons why these things are happening. But you'll find, I wrote briefly about this and described it like being up in space and looking down on traffic, and you'd see the cars moving around, and you'd have cars going in this direction, you'd have some cars going up cul-de-sacs and having to reverse back out to go round. That's quality assurance systems in some countries, where for a while they will say, we are going to quality assure in this way. And institutions would set themselves up internally to relate to this external system. The authorities after 5 years would say, we're fed up with that, or we don't think that's very good. Let's change it. And we'll reverse out of that cul-de-sac and we'll change from external institutional review to external subject review. And then 3 or 4 later, they change it again. The problem with that is, and somebody used the analogy this morning, taking serious enhancement in a university is like turning a tanker. Some things you can do like that, you can do very quickly. But a lot of enhancement takes time. A single cohort of undergraduate students takes 4 years. So if we're going to seriously make big changes, a major curriculum change, for example, and seriously evaluate the impact of that change, it's 4 years before these students are even graduating, let alone going into employment and then seeing how things work in employment. So one of the hallmarks of all of our framework, I hope, and every sign is that hope's being lived up to, is it is a stable system. And a lot of colleagues in Iceland have said to me that is really important. It's a transparent system. It's a system that is not encouraging game playing. For these reasons, I say it is actually at least as good as any system that is available elsewhere. It meets all the ENCOD criteria, every one of them. But it does deliver things that lead to change. If you go into you could not have this meeting in many countries in the world. The first meetings I went to when I became involved in this area were so hostile. You would have people from institutions, people from the agency that's running the quality assurance body, and it just stopped short of physical violence. That's not an environment where anything is going to be enhanced. Now, especially from a ministry perspective, one of the things that you absolutely correctly, you're holding us to account, you're holding the system to account. It's public accountability. We need to account to Icelandic society and more wider that our standards and quality is as good as would be expected elsewhere. I think the government here took exactly the right, the ministry here took exactly the right step when we first became involved and said, this is first and foremost about Icelandic higher education, but we are in relative terms, a small community. We need to be open to international scrutiny. So when I first became involved, my instruction, not guidance, my instruction was to create a team on the quality board that drew what I thought was the best internationally, and to create a system of review that opened it up to international scrutiny for exactly the reasons that you suggest. And I would put my hand on heart and say the evidence we have is that when we say we can have confidence in something, then from people whose judgment we respect internationally, and we've got good reason to respect their judgment, are agreeing with our judgments. And that is true in all of the areas that we do at the institutional level. At the institutional level. At the subject level, we have introduced externality, independent externality in all subject reviews to ensure that exactly the same is the case. And we're in the process, again, in consultation with colleagues, we had quite a long discussion about this at the board meeting yesterday, about just making sure we all understand exactly the same, no conflicts of interest between externals and the institutions that are involved in these processes, so that we can be as confident as one can be that we are getting proper benchmarking internationally. So I'm very happy to say that, to reply in the affirmative to both of your questions. The system that is closest to this, but it's not the same, but it's kind of in my genes, is in Scotland. The philosophy is very similar, but it's not the same. We've had important inputs to this from Norway, from France, from one of our colleagues who's unfortunately not particularly well and not able to be with us today, from America, who has had a very important input into it. So our framework is unique. But in Scotland recently, which is a slightly inferior system to this, there has been an evaluation by our funding council, which essentially is a government department, into the effectiveness of the enhancement themes. In other words, is it actually changing behaviours? And what it's now been running 10 years, and the evidence that we have is it is very clear that it is changing behaviours. And that is how I think universities work. They don't work with people standing, wagging a finger, saying, this is how you do it. It works by people saying, look, these are interesting ways of doing these things. Have you thought about that? What kind of evidence do you use to tell you how good you're... It's about that kind of dialogue and encouragement and so on.
Well, one thing that we could add to what you just said, it's clear that it would be useful for all of us to have external people invited here to show their best practices and how it can be used in Iceland. But also what we mentioned recently this morning would be also to have research and teaching which are done in one specific research area that is very good in Iceland and could be shown to other people as being very effective. In other words, it's not only coming things from outside to Iceland, but it's also showing what is done in Iceland that could be useful to other universities.
Absolutely.
Other questions? Yes?
Yes, I have a question to the board. If now you have had 3 institutions through the whole process. At this point, I'm not sure if maybe Rita mentioned it, but is there something that you will change now in the procedure, or put more emphasis on different things, or will you simply continue? Have you discovered something special in our system that so you need to adapt somehow or change the system?
Well, I'm sure we will adapt until the last evaluation. But there's things that are coming over and over again. For instance, formalizing things. People say we didn't have any assessment before, and now we need that. The way the procedure is in our university has not been formalized. You've seen that several times today. That's clearly something that is going to be with us until the end of our evaluation.
Are you suggesting that we are changing over the cycle and learning things?
Yeah.
Uh-huh. There's, I think, so if I can just have a first stab at that, but I don't want to monopolise it. I think that again is a really interesting issue. It's getting the balance right between continuity and change. When we met in the first year with Reykjavik University, and we kind of went on our knees and said, "Please, would you please go first in this?" And our colleagues there very kindly agreed to it. One of the deals that you do. It's not a shady deal, but one of the deals that you do is you give an assurance, a professional assurance, that this process is not going to change significantly over its 5 years. So what you will receive, as far as we can possibly make it, will be exactly the same as what others receive. And that's the bedrock, and we won't deviate from that. What's in that handbook is what we will engage, the basis on which we'll engage with Magnus and colleagues in the University of Iceland in our last year, and in Bifrost also. But we learn, and some of the things that you both mentioned today we pick up. Issues with language constantly sit on our shoulders. I feel guilty at every meeting that we have that apart from Ina, none of us can speak Icelandic. Tovi's the closest to it. She can speak ancient Norse very well.
I can read ancient Norse.
You can read it, Tovi. And that is important. And someone's, perhaps yourself, and certainly Rita made the point, and Erla certainly made the point, it's not just about words. And actually we've had a long discussion, and I remember Schooley raising it in the very early days. Even if you just take the word confidence, what does that translate as? And it translates as, the closest to it when you translate it back again is really trust.
Trust, yes.
And trust and confidence are not quite the right things. Somebody, after a few glasses of wine, I would have to say, last night somebody was saying, if I ran under a bus after we ate, and standing at the pearly gates, if I was allowed to get that far, if the good Lord said to me, "Well, I'm sorry, Norman, I have no confidence in you," how would I feel about that in comparison to if he said to me, "I'm sorry, I have no trust in you"? And I'd rather he said, "I've got no confidence," I think. It's not very nice. I'd rather just get straight in, but there you go. So it's things like that. It's where you think you're using the same words, but actually you're not. In Holar in particular, I think there was a meeting, Rita, where just working in English was clearly a disadvantage. Yes. People felt excluded from the conversation, and that's not good. That's not. It's your provision. It's your university, and people are not allowed to speak in their own language. But I can't find a solution to that. I really can't. And it's not just for us. More importantly, it's for the international experts that we're bringing, who've got to be independent. So the chances are they're not going to be able to speak Icelandic either. But we're just worrying away at that as we go and trying to find better ways of handling that issue. And there are some other examples that don't come quite to my mind just now. But it's trying to make the same system work better as we're going through it. But the year in which we'll all stand back together and think, now, this is our chance. It's like your programme reviews. This is our chance to stand back, look at what all this adds up to, and say, now, do we want to change it now in more fundamental ways? Are there things that we do need to think needs more fundamental changing.
Yeah,
Right,
and
just-
so, sorry.
It just might be worth adding, I think you put that extremely well, Norman, if I may say so, but it might be worth adding, emphasising that it's important to get feedback from your colleagues, from your members of staff, and indeed your students about how the processes work, and to get it, soon after the visits and the reviews have taken place, so it is fresh in people's minds and so on, so that we can gather this information together, and that will inform our reflections on the process after the reviews are completed. In the meantime, I agree, it's only fair to, especially the first institutions, that we keep a consistent system.
Yeah.
But again, it's also clear that since you have completely different institutions, that the report is not going to be the same, because your preoccupations are different.
Indeed.
I think the fifth year, the reflective year is going to be extremely important, because I was saying at the beginning, it's one thing to put the documentation together. It's quite another thing to hear a colleague describe what happened, but it's very different actually to participate in something. And in a sense, there's a learning curve for the quality board in that regard as well. Each institution is very much an individual institution, and one learns different things in different institutions, but one also learns that there are things similar that we have to think more carefully about. And I think, just to emphasise what Norman was saying earlier on about the formation of the Quality Council, it's going to be extremely important to us, because I'm sure you're going to keep us on our toes about that, and I'm sure also in that fifth year what we'll be actually doing is evaluating the thing together. So we have institutional input all the way through. It's not just what we've observed, as it were, from outside, although by that time I don't think we'll feel as if we're outside, but very much what the institutions also have felt in the process. I think the fundamentals of the system, and just to go back to what you were saying in response to the Minister's question there, the fundamentals of the system so far haven't shown any real cracks. I mean, all right, there's the language issue, and I'm not sure how we deal with that, except we've decided to make a glossary where we've got a definition of the terms, first of all, and then perhaps a translation of the terms. That might help. But I think there aren't any, from my experience so far, and I think Frank might have views on this too, there aren't any cracks in the system that we've viewed. It doesn't mean to say it can't get better, can't get more open, can't get more transparent. But I think if we constantly try and break the system open so that everybody knows what's happening and what to expect, it can only get better. And I also agree with Frank from my much more limited experience than yours. The system here is probably much more transparent, much more rigorous, for all that it's more informal and open in a sense. It's actually probably more rigorous than systems elsewhere. So I think confidence is something you can have as well.
John?
Yes.
There is one thing I have noted when I compare the report written at the university we got from you last year compared to these two that were presented now. They are a little bit different, especially how you sum up in the end. I find the present report a little more clear. You sum up in a more clear way. And I guess that's helpful for all these that quickly browse through and need to see quickly what were the main results. I think that was a good improvement in the style of the report.
I think that's a really helpful comment. I mean, I know Rita and Frank work very hard at trying to do that. I think the more precise, actually, what we say about reflective analysis, it's exactly the same. The more succinct we can be, and the clearer we can be about the main points, then the better it is. There is an awful tendency in these reports sometimes to make them terribly convoluted and difficult to interpret. So I'm really pleased to hear that, and Rita and Frank will be even more pleased. And that's our direction of travel. We hope to live up to that as we go on. So that's really helpful.
Further questions? Yes?
Yeah, maybe not a question, I just want to add to this discussion. Before I do that, you were talking about trust. I think that everyone inside this room can say that they trust you, the members, very well, based on your track records and quality, and we have been working with you. But the question is, do we trust the process? And I would be stupid if I can say yes, because I will probably say it could answer that question in 5 years if I could see any improvement in my institution. And then I say, okay, the most important thing in the whole quality enhancement is the process itself. And you, with starting this, has given us, the institution, whether it's in a university or department, an opportunity to start a process which will help us to go in the right direction. And that is unique for many of the institutions. That has not been done before in Iceland. We have the regulations, all kinds of papers, how to do it, and this process helped us to really do our self-analysis. And that, I think, is extremely important, and that is what is, really good with this process. And I think that's the most important thing. I can answer the question, trust. Do I trust myself in going on for the 5 years and improve? You should also, you should ask yourself.
I think that's very good, very, very opposite comment. One of the things that will happen, I'm fairly confident as we move forward, and as you're thinking about the following 5 years, is that one of the aspects in these kinds of discussions at periodic review would be about enhancement and how you're reflecting yourselves as institutions on what's come out of all of your subject reviews and what's come out of this. How do you see yourself moving forward? And that is where we then begin to accumulate the evidence, very hard evidence, along with your students, that we can go to the ministry and say, there is the evidence, it's getting better. You're quite right.
Magnus?
Thanks. My name is Magnus. I'm with the ministry now, but because I'm not with the board anymore, I can speak more freely. Some people actually think I speak too freely at the ministry, but I actually think in regards to judgment, whether it's confidence or trust, I think it's we're placing too much focus on the judgments, basically because it's like, even though it's not a favorable comparison, it's like reading a finding by a judge. I mean, you can read the statement or findings, but you have to go through the whole paper to see the arguments. So I mean, if you're only picking up the judgment, you're not taking in the contents of the report. So it's just we have to have some sort of judgment. And I can remember the discussions about whether we should use the word confidence or. Yes. And people actually found the word confidence okay, but they didn't like limited confidence, and no confidence was just something that nobody wanted to actually write down. But if we would have substituted the word confidence for trust and said, we'll do this, we'll use full trust, limited trust, and no trust, but we'll guarantee that no one will get limited trust in the first round, people would have accepted that. It's like Iceland playing Italy. We could say we'll do it just square 1-1, or we'll take the risk and play the game. We'll do it 1-1 or 0-0. So I think we shouldn't focus too much on whether it's what are the exact words that we use for the judgment. And then of course I tend to agree with Christian on what's coming out of the process. There is a problem with the Icelandic way of thinking, that the law applies to someone else, not yourself. When there comes a report, everyone is happy with the judgment, but just don't apply the judgment to my institution. I would be much more sort of interested in seeing how the process works to lift the standards of education in Iceland. So that's whether it's based on trust, confidence, or whatever. That's not the really important question for me. So, thank you.
I think that's a very helpful input, Magnus. Thank you. And yesterday, I don't know how many of you would see it. For some reason, this was picked up in the news, on the radio, and there was something on television. And I know Einar spent a long time briefing the journalist involved who contacted Rannis on exactly these points, Magnus. That it's important that there are judgments for the very reasons we were discussing earlier about public accountability. I don't shy away from that. But that's fundamentally, it's not a regulatory process. It is about enhancements, about making things better. And actually, I think, as far as I've been told, because I couldn't understand it, but as far as it's been translated for me, I think that was a very effective briefing. And hats off to your journalists. I don't think we'd have got as responsible reporting. Our gutter press, well, some good press, but the gutter press would have flipped quickly through the report, picked up any negative word, and it would have been in the headlines, and everything else would have been forgotten. So I was delighted with, as I understand, with the reporting. Generally, I don't think these things should be they should be in the public domain. They should be transparent. But I'm not one for trying to get these things in the press.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Rosa?
Yes.
I want to pick up on what Christian said and what you were talking about others as well, is that what comes next? Now we've got reports now for reflective analysis from 3 universities, and we've got, in some cases, stacks of subject level reviews, like in University of Iceland. And what comes next? It's going to be looking at what's actually developing in a kind of an embryonic state, though, is a quality system constructed and controlled and executed by the universities themselves.
Exactly.
So this is something that, from my point of view, is rather unique, but has precedences all over the world, really. But what we can do now is that if we want to make this actually a viable choice as a quality system for Icelandic higher education, the universities themselves have to be responsible for the follow-ups. Because quite important question is, how is the quality board going to follow up on all the suggestions that come from within the reports? And I think the solution that has come up now with the Quality Council being a body that can actually be a support unit between the universities, how we can actually support each other in following up. There are issues that we need to address, like in assessment, what we were talking about earlier, is having external examinations, having double marking, all of these things. We can't do as a single unit, as a university. We have to do it on a broader scale. And these are issues that are coming up in all the, not just in the RAs, but also in the subject level reviews. And these are issues that we can't expect something else to come and help us with. This is something that we have to do ourselves. So my point of view is that we have taken a huge step from just having accreditation processes in 2006 and 2007 into having actually, even though it's an embryonic state, we have a quality system that can be of huge use to all of us. But it's ours to control and it's ours to execute, to do. We can't wait for anybody else to do it. So Quality Council not being conducted as just directors, but actually the people on the floor, is probably the best idea that has come through this year.
Again, I'm very pleased to hear that. That's absolutely spot on. It is. We are dealing. It's right, and that is right for autonomous institutions. And the autonomy of universities is extremely important. Just very briefly, flashing back to your own question, the flip side of the same coin, if you say yes, these are totally autonomous institutions. We have to then, that's why the word confidence or trust, whatever we use, is so important, because you can then be assured that, oh, well, it's not just that we're ignoring all of that and giving it all away. There are checks and balances in the system that can give the public confidence all of this is being carried forward appropriately and effectively and with results. But the point you make is absolutely right. A lot of us have many discussions with Magnus about what the Quality Board should be doing year on year with the subject review reports. Should we be examining them all closely and having discussions with universities each year about these? And we may change this in the future after 5 years. At the moment, my thought is, our thought is, it's not mine, our thought is that it goes back to this business of autonomy. This is part of your engine. It's these things are coming out of the subject reviews. The question is not what's the Quality Board going to do about it, it's what you're going to do about it. And then every 5 years, or actually partly at the annual discussions, so we're not totally divorced from it, but certainly every 5 years, there's a formal process where we can have a full review team having that discussion with you. What are you doing with these subject review reports? Is it working? Is it effective? Is it making things better? And then that report goes into public domain. The ministry, the taxpayer, anyone who wants to see it can then see, yes, we can have confidence that these universities are managing their affairs responsibly. So you've caught it all so well, Rosa.
I think it's important for us to actually own up the responsibility.
Exactly.
With freedom becomes responsibility.
Exactly.
Do you feel that?
I do.
And I mean, I would be interested in hearing. Sorry, I'm Ola from the Art Academy. I would just be interested in hearing. How do people feel after this process? The University of Reykjavik, Holar, and the Agricultural University. I mean, do you actually feel like what have you done since the? Well, I mean, it's new for you guys, but maybe it's a question more for you, the two of you.
What we've done is we're looking very carefully at all the structures within the university. One of the things that we're looking at is the
policy of the university.
Yeah. So we're looking at the charter, really, and seeing how we can manifest roles within that. Clearer. It's there, but it's the reflective analysis has given us a different view on that. So it is it's helping us, but it's not one of the things that were issued. But this is something that we see as important. We're looking also at the accreditation period as well. What is in there that can actually help us go forward? So there are ownership of the process is very, very important. And not having somebody else do reporting for you. I think it's very important. Also, involving key persons within the university, that has changed. When people are actually saying, oh, yeah, the thing that I'm doing is actually important, and they're listening to me. So, that, but of course, this huge about but in action.
Yeah, I want to agree with Rosa. I mean, it's been extremely useful. But we saw the drawbacks in some ways, but in general it's extremely useful. But I think there are two ways that the universities have to implement. They have to implement it into strategic planning.
Yes.
And it's planning within departments and on the university as a whole. And the second thing is that we need to find a way to increase the quality awareness among the staff, because there are so many people that think this is yet another box tick, and it's our responsibility as the administrators, because often we don't in Holar, but you have this quality manager that has a quality office that's in the main building, that's on a 5th floor or whatever. Exactly. And then this has to trickle down. So because we were asking people, what was your experience? And at least one member, that's one member too many, I said, I didn't realize it was quality enhancement.
Oh my.
And that's our, as a Holar fault, that
Yes.
we haven't educated. But we, and that's where the quality board and the universities work together, is to change the ideas, because we want to make it better.
Exactly. Exactly.
But just
Well,
like
Yeah. Right.
to add to this, I skipped it from a presentation earlier because I thought it was too bold, but now I'm going to share it. But, so even though like the report was made public yesterday, we finalized our reflective analysis in January. And I was going to end my presentation up there earlier by saying that today it's better to be a student at Holar University College than it was a year ago. So it's tiny steps, but I am rock solid confident that the small things that we have already fixed and improved have made the student experience better than it was a year ago. And I'm pretty pleased with that. Just knowing that, because that's all the whole realm of things is yet to be completed. I'm not like nearly there, but I know from my heart that it's better to be there today than it was a year ago. And that is a pleasant thing.
The point that's extremely helpful, and the point that you were making, Johnny, earlier about increasingly as all of this gets fully bedded in, these processes, these kind of external processes, the QEF processes, really all should become part and parcel of just the institutional cycle of strategic planning and reflection and everything. This is just part and parcel of it, so that it's not thinking, and I know we're already getting way down that line, it's not thinking, oh well, we don't need to do another reflective analysis for another 5 years. It's just all part and parcel of this process.
That's actually a very good thought, though.
Well, just for this weekend.
I think you're right, because it is extremely important. You know, the quality enhancement in universities or whatever the institutions is not done in a department on the 5th floor.
Correct.
It's not. It's, you know, you have to do it through all the staff members,
Yes.
everyone.
Yes.
Whether it's, you know, academic or support staff or, you know, whatever it is, everyone has to be involved. And that's why it is so important when we do the reflective analysis that everyone is involved.
Indeed.
The students, staff,
And that you take the students with you.
everyone is involved,
Yes.
because then the whole university, because the university is mostly students, don't forget that. The whole university is, you know, they own these reflective analysis, not a department, not the rector or whatever it is.
Exactly.
It's you know, this is important.
The community, yes.
The points that Regis has put up during your lecture here, these are just like important points. We have already been looking at how we could actually conduct our next reflective analysis. How could we get more out of that? And having those points that you pointed out is something that, of course, having gone first, we kind of didn't know what to expect at all. So a lot of the things that we put in our report and how it was structured and how we're using it, we're thinking, we'll do this a little bit different next time, and we will have to involve this and da 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 da. So it is giving us food for thought. So even though if you take the weekend off, that's fine, but Monday. It is important to have this working on this and also comparing your reports or feedbacks to what we've got. It's something that is actually going to help us quite a lot.
Can I just add that pre-application with quality isn't, I could just make you happy that it's not, it's a universal problem. We have it at the ministry as well. We're trying to raise the quality, and we have a quality officer at the ministry. He's like the least popular person. So I mean, it's we all think about quality. So we have to do it.
Maybe on that note.
Yeah. No more questions? Well, thank you everybody for coming here, and we'll see you very, very soon.
Thank you.